Hello, everyone. Darcenovia here. I am back with a video about the sequel trilogy. Yay! That's a topic that has not been done to death. This is not a topic that people haven't debated and talked about a billion times. Now, why am I talking about the sequel trilogy? Again, well, it's for fun, and well, I did mention in a stream like a month ago about the sequel trilogy, what should be done with it, but I'd like to maybe give my overall thoughts about this trilogy as of, you know, 2021. Has my feeling changed? To be honest, I still dislike them, and I think that the strong dislike I have of these movies will never truly go away, purely because, I don't like the aesthetic of the sequel trilogy. I don't like the characters of the sequel trilogy. I don't like the wasted potential of the sequel trilogy. And I do not like, you know, how these movies exist at the expense of the expanded universe, which had decades of material that was far better than what we got before. And it feels like, you know, they had all these interesting ideas, for the sequel trilogy potentially in form of books and novels, and they decide to do the bare minimum. Oh yes, let's rehash the original trilogy again. Let's constantly remind the audience how much they love Star Wars, even though that's not really necessary. And that's just my general thoughts about them in general. You know, I do not like these films. But do I think these movies should be thrown in the trash bin when it comes to canon? Do I think people are overzealous when it comes to their hatred for these films? Yes, I actually do. And I think people, unfortunately, just Star Wars fans just don't know how to move on. And it's the sad and honest truth. The sequel trilogy isn't going anywhere. And I feel like that's just something that Star Wars fans are going to have to accept. Those who hated the prequels, they still haven't accepted, the prequel trilogy being canon or the prequel trilogy, whether they're good or bad movies. They still haven't dealt with that. And sequel trilogy people that despise these films won't let it go either. I'm just going to level with you folks. As bad as the sequel trilogy movies are, there are far worse films than the sequel trilogy that have done far more egregious things, with the source material of their respective films. And they don't get the attention that they get. The sequel trilogy films aren't the only thing that exist for Star Wars. Honestly. Star Wars, at the end of the day, is fiction. If you don't want to accept these movies as canon, fine. You do have an alternative. There's always legends if you want to, read about an alternate, fate for Luke Skywalker and, Han and Leia. If you want to experience a different story that respects these characters and actually gives them, the treatment that they deserve. If that's how you feel, you should go with Legends. But I know what you're thinking. Those stories aren't canon. Why should I read fan fiction? Well, I'm just giving you a suggestion. If that's how you feel about the EU. If you think the EU is not good enough for you, then you're going to have to accept the fact that the sequel trilogy is all you're going to get if you want for a continuation of the originals. You're going to have to accept the fact that the sequel trilogy is what happened to Luke, Han, and Leia. If you're not even willing to actually read the expanded universe for a alternate continuation, then I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I really do not know what to tell you. I don't know what I can tell you to convince you otherwise. I know I have no room to talk, honestly, but I'm just being real with you at this point. They're not going to do anything against the sequel trilogy. They're not going to, declare them non-canon. They're not going to do the veil and the force that will remove these films from canon. That's just wishful thinking. And honestly, it's not productive to, wish for something that's not going to happen. The sequel trilogy, it was terrible. I will admit, they're bad movies. You're never going to see me ever defend these films. But the thing about the sequel trilogy that we all have to understand here, like the prequels before them and the Clone Wars, they've introduced an entire generation to Star Wars. Whether you think those people are going to come back, to Star Wars when they're in their 20s is another question entirely. But those who were introduced to Star Wars through the sequel trilogy, they're not less fans than those who were introduced to Star Wars through the prequels or the originals. And honestly, I had enough of this gatekeeping shit. Honestly, as someone that's guilty of doing it myself, I'm just tired. It's not, what's the point of claiming this person isn't a fan and that person isn't a fan? It's nothing more than elitist nonsense. I mean, seriously. The sequel trilogy, if I had to be real with you folks, they're just a series of movies. They're a piece of entertainment, whether you like it or not. And those who like the films are Star Wars fans. If you don't think they're Star Wars fans, then you know what? There's a door you can go through, and you can leave the fandom altogether. Because if you're going to tell people they're less fans because they like the sequel trilogy and that's their Star Wars, then if I had to be real with you, the door is open for you. You can leave and never come back. Because the one thing you 50-something-year-old boomer Star Wars fans are, and more like Gen Xers, but I'm just doing this here, need to accept Star Wars isn't catering to you anymore. It has stopped catering to you since the late 1990s. You people tried to basically erase an entire generation of Star Wars fans with your nonsensical videos and your stupid, documentaries about how George Lucas raped your childhood. It wasn't millennials doing this shit. It wasn't my generation that did this shit. It was you. And now that, you got a taste of your own medicine with the sequel trilogy, which basically gave the middle finger to those who liked the prequels with The Force Awakens, in the advertisement, which you had no issues with that, and a middle finger to those who enjoy other aspects of Star Wars that isn't the original trilogy. You know what? I think you deserve what the sequel trilogy, did to you. Because let's be real, you had no issue with media pundits, calling, those who love the EU man babies for rejecting The Force Awakens. You had no objections of people shitting on people who like the prequels as not real Star Wars fans. So, if I had to be real with you, if anybody has a right to gatekeep, I feel like it's those who you harassed for all these years. And I do think the sequel trilogy hatred is getting to a point where it's ridiculous. It's worse than the prequel hate at this point. Yes, the sequel trilogy were terrible movies. The Force Awakens was a lazy rehash of the original trilogy. The Last Jedi, was a divisive film that really didn't have a clear message. The Rise of Skywalker, was felt like a poorly written fan fiction in movie form. The sequel trilogy just felt like a mess. And I'm never going to defend those films. Now, the sequel trilogy regarding, will they be removed from canon? Should they be removed from canon? Honestly, the only people that truly give a shit about this sort of shit are a bunch of nerds on the internet. Because let's be real, most people have moved on from the sequel trilogy. Any sane person would have moved on from the prequels, even. Look at people who are still dwelling on the prequels and the sequel trilogy as a bunch of crazy loons. And that's exactly what you people are, who still complain about these films. Honestly, you're it's something we're going to have to accept, that they're canon, that they've happened, and any new projects that get made have to work with them. And I'm sorry, a lot in a way where you don't like Sot canon. No, that's not how it works. You may not like the sequel trilogy, but they happened. And if you ask me, removing them from canon would show that Lucasfilm is not really committed to keeping a cohesive continuity. Because if things get too dicey and they get too inconvenient and they get written to a corner, guess what? We'll just use time travel to, remove this inconvenience, from canon. Let's be honest here, the average moviegoer doesn't give a fuck about canon. They don't even care about the word canon. Only nerds care about that shit. Only nerds on the internet care about canon. And the sequel trilogy, they're canon. It's time to accept it. You don't have to accept them as part of your head canon if you want, or you don't consider them canon because of reasons. That's fine. It's fiction at the end of the day. You have options other than, demanding a company that probably doesn't even care about what you have to think, removing 3 films from canon when, let's be real, why would they listen to a bunch of whiny nerds on the internet who are like not even, the huge percentage of the fan base? Like, let's be real. I know a lot of people like to think that, that they're, the majority of the fan base when they say, nobody likes the sequel trilogy. Well, people said the same thing about the prequels. Fans, don't like these films. Look at the merchandise. The same rehashed arguments about the toys rotting on store shelves. Okay, let's be real. Yeah, the Star Wars toys, they're not selling as well as they used to be. But you know what? Action figures in general aren't selling as well because kids don't freaking play with toys these days. You know what kids play with? They have iPhones. They have video games. And why would a child, unless they're from a family that don't expose them to electronics, want a freaking toy when they can play a video game? I'm just being real. Toys are a niche market these days. Toys are essentially things that collectors, buy. It's not kids that, buy this stuff. It's not kids that actually ask their parents to do this. It's mostly adults who, buy toys, because they're collectors. Collectors are the only kind of people that buy, action figures these days. It's a very niche market, and toys are a niche market these days. And if you're using that as an argument for why the sequel trilogy is not popular, that's a weak ass argument, because the same can be said for any property. You know, it just people aren't buying toys. It's not the thing that sells the most. It's a niche market. And if you don't actually realize that toys are a niche market, I don't know what the hell to tell you, honestly. And yeah, a bigger argument would be, comics and books, because that's more people buy those than toys, these days, on average. Yeah, the argument can be made that the Star Wars books are not selling as well as they used to be, but then again, that's also a weak argument. People are not reading as much as they used to. This is the year 2021. This isn't like, 1991, where a lot more people read than they do now. So that's also a weak argument. And comics, comics, is kind of a niche industry too, outside of Marvel and DC. So, that's another weak argument regarding the sequel trilogy. I'm not saying the sequel trilogy is super, super duper popular, but it's not a good argument for, saying that it's not canon. It shouldn't be canon, and they're going to decanonize it for that reason. I'll tell you this: one of the least popular Star Trek series, Kelvin timeline, Star Trek, is Voyager and Enterprise. Yet, are you going to say those are not canon because of their popularities of those shows? No, of course not. So no, popularity is not a good argument for something being canon or not, or it should not be canon. It's a weak argument. Now, let's be real. Let's assume for a second they do what you want. They, say these movies never happened. They happen in an alternate timeline. What is the average person in the audience going to think? They're going to like, what? They're going to be confused. And the average moviegoer doesn't give a fuck about what is and what isn't canon, because that's not what they freaking go to the movies for. They go to the movies to be entertained. They don't go to the movies to actually, discuss why the fuck are they doing this? Why do they do the hyperspace ram? This is stupid. This makes no sense. There's so many plot holes. The average person doesn't give a fuck about that shit because they don't watch movies for that. They watch movies to be entertained at the end of the day. That is not, the reason they go to watch a movie. They don't care about canon. I'm sorry to say this, but the average audience who watches a piece of entertainment doesn't care what isn't canon. And it only looks like it's a majority of the people. It's because a bunch of assholes on the internet say some stupid shit. They speak the loudest, they scream the loudest, so that automatically makes it like that they're right. Because, and let's be real, these same people that claim that they're the majority are the same few individuals that say the same arguments. So, no, it's not a valid argument for the sequel trilogy. Now, what should be done with the sequels? I should say. If we're going to keep them in canon, what should we do with them? Now, retcon is a touchy subject, especially for those who defend the sequel trilogy. But let's be real, most Star Wars fans don't have any clue what a retcon is. They think retcon means this stuff is no longer canon. And yeah, hey, Papa Wedge, but this stuff is no longer canon. No, that's not what it means. Retconning, something does not mean it's no longer canon. It's ridiculous. Comics have had retcons for years, and and Batman's, story, his origin story is still freaking canon, and it doesn't make any sense. Retcons is essentially like elaborating on a previously established, event or character's backstory and expanding upon it, changing the way you would look at it. That's what a retcon is. retconning the sequel trilogy would essentially be changing what the movies mean, what is established in those films. The only good thing about the sequel trilogy, it's so fucking vague of what happens in this era that they have enough wiggle room to actually work with them and make it work. Like they could simply retcon, the sequels. Like the reason why the New Republic was weak is because it fought a huge war, sometime before The Force Awakens, and they were weakened as a result. And why they were on the verge of collapse prior to The Force Awakens, because they didn't recover from the last war that they had with XXX enemy that they fought. There's so many things they can do. Yeah, exactly. It's like, and honestly, there is an argument on the side of those who defend the sequels who lose their shit when you bring up the word retcon. And I'm going to do a difference. Saying that the EU no longer is canon is not a retcon. You're just deciding that these stories, are no longer happened in the official canon. That is not a retcon. Retcon and let's do an example. The Death Star plans. Rogue One is not a retcon of Dark Forces because, one, Rogue One is in a different continuity than Dark Forces. So that's not a retcon. That's just a new story and a new established canon. I mean, retcons happen all the fucking time. In Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC. It's such commonplace. It's just Star Wars fans are the only fan base that freaking lose their fucking shit when you hear the word retcon. No, retcon is neither good or bad. It depends on how it's done. Because the sequel trilogy retconned, the entire saga in one film with The Rise of Skywalker. Yet, silence about, the sequel trilogy retconning things, but it's okay. When you do it to the sequels, you've killed someone's puppy. It's like retconning the sequel films would actually help the films, not do anything to ruin them. Because let's be real, as the movies stand right now, they really have nothing. They're such bare bones in terms of lore in the sequel era that giving some retcons would actually give them a much needed freaking legs to stand on because they have nothing. Yeah, they could. Yes, they could. It's like there's so much things they can do. And honestly, and I know that it should be obvious where I stand on this, declaring the sequel trilogy no longer canon, to me, is the laziest thing you can do creatively. It's because, okay, it's inconvenient to actually keep this in canon because we fucked up. No, I'm sorry. If the expanded universe did something that it's stuck, canon should do the same thing. If it fucks up, it needs to freaking, accept that it fucked up and actually work with that fuck up. Because that's what it means to actually grow as a universe. You don't get to retcon something because it's inconvenient. That's the problem with, wanting the sequel trilogy removed from canon. I was in the camp that wanted these movies removed, but it would create more problems that it would solve. Okay, I'm not going to lie. If you remove the sequel trilogy, nothing would really change fundamentally in the timeline. Except you would lose some comics, you'd lose a few novels here and there. That's it. But let's be real. If you remove the sequel trilogy, you'd have to reestablish everything again from scratch. And yeah, the sequel trilogy basically has almost nothing to work, in the movies themselves in terms of lore. But if you remove them completely, you'd have to create an entirely new, era from scratch. And if you ask me, it's just would be more trouble than it's worth. And not to mention, let's be real, You cannot use Carrie Fisher again because she's not in this world anymore. Harrison Ford is not coming back. Mark Hamill is not coming back. So, no, I'm sorry. You have the sequel trilogy. You're stuck what you got. You got to work, with the tools that you currently have. You can't just disregard, these tools because they don't work as well. They're the only things you have. And if you want to make the sequel trilogy work in the grander scheme of Star Wars, you're going to have to work with them in long term. Yeah. And not to mention, okay, I'm not going to throw the money card. Oh, they made so much money off of this. They're not going to, decanonize them for that reason. Disney doesn't give a fuck about canon. Honestly, to Disney, it's just a marketing term. Disney doesn't care. What they care about is money. And honestly, I don't even think Disney even considering this. And all these rumors with you hear stuff that's going behind the scene, they're gonna use the veil of the Force to remove, this shit from canon. It's like, okay, say what you will about the sequel trilogy, especially The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, feeling like fan fiction. All these theories about the veil of the Force just sounds like fan fiction. And honestly, I just don't know how it would work. I know there's a theory floating around that, Mandalorian is in a different timeline than, the sequel trilogy. Would you be able to work with that? No. Okay, first off, that's also fan fiction. Star Wars is never established to have multiple timelines. In Legends or in canon, it's never established that there was multiple timelines. Star Wars is not Star Trek. In Star Trek, you can get away with this because Star Trek, in every iteration, it was established that there's a multiverse that exists. Star Wars has never established that. And if you establish a multiverse in Star Wars, that would open up a new can of worms. Okay, if Star Wars has a multiverse, does that mean Legends is canon as too? See. Yeah, I know. The stupid Civil War, it's just not happening. It's really not happening. I mean, if I had to be real, I don't think the people in Lucasfilm care one way or the other about the sequel trilogy. Honestly. They just want to move on with their lives. And let's be real, why would you spend 5 years working on the sequel trilogy only to reestablish the era, again? That would mean you've wasted half a decade on stupid nonsense. It's like, no, nobody is going to freaking, do that. No company is going to waste like half a decade of an investment just to appease a bunch of stupid freaking incels on the internet complaining about every little fucking thing that's they do with Star Wars. Come on. They're not going to listen to a bunch of incels on the internet. They're going to freaking listen to their investors. That's what Disney's going to do. I'm sorry. You live in a capitalist society, and if you believe in capitalism like all these people do, then they're going to follow the money. And the fandom menace, no. They're a minority in the fandom. They are not the majority. The only reason they appear to be the majority because they speak the loudest. The sequel trilogy hate, I'm going to be honest, just like the prequel hate, was a vocal minority. Those who hated the prequels, were always the vocal minority. But people who hated the prequels and the sequels today, they're just a vocal minority that this continues to complain about the same goddamn thing, and at the end of the day, nobody cares other than those people. Honestly. And I don't think Doomcock actually believes in those rumors. And not to mention, what these people advocate for is fan service. Removing the sequel trilogy is nothing more than fan service. Okay, here's the problem. And I keep saying this. You remove the sequel trilogy. Okay, now what? Where do you go from there? You remove possibly one of the most hated aspects of the franchise. Yeah, what are you going to replace it with? I'm serious. What are you going to replace the sequel trilogy with? Mandalorian? Mandalorian takes place 25 years before The Force Awakens. Okay, what are you going to replace it with? Because if you have nothing to replace it with, then you're just like getting rid of shit for no reason. You're just going to have a void in the timeline. I mean, seriously. Okay, I understand people not liking the sequels. Me being in that camp. But we got to be realistic here, honestly, with the sequel trilogy. And let's be real. It's been over a year since Rise of Skywalker came and went from theaters. Honestly, it went out with the sequel trilogy went out with a whimper. You uh, you're gonna have to accept the fact the sequel trilogy is gonna be forever part of Star Wars. It wouldn't matter if it's canon or not. It wouldn't matter. It's still gonna be part of Star Wars forever. You're not gonna be able to remove the legacy of the sequel trilogy. Even if you got what you want, it's not gonna change the fact that the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens is one of the highest grossing movies of all time. You're not going to change that fact, even if it was no longer canon. You're not going to change the fact that The Last Jedi is one of the most divisive films in the 2010s. You're not going to change the fact that Rise of Skywalker is one of the worst movies ever made. None of this stuff is going to change. You're not going to change anything, whether they are removed from canon or not. Their legacy is going to remain, for better or for worse. Yeah, remaking the sequels would be like, what the fuck? So we're wasting another fucking 5 years on the same goddamn story a third time? Yeah, exactly. I saw it in theaters too, unfortunately. I mean, The Rise of Skywalker, you know, it was everything that these fucking fanboys wanted. The Last Jedi being basically constantly shitted on, nearly all of The Last Jedi's plot points being rejected. I mean, the Rise of Skywalker was just a middle finger to The Last Jedi. They got what they wanted, yet they still reject it because it's the sequels. And the legacy of the sequel trilogy is going to be that of, wasted potential. Now, you do have an option for those of you who are still dwelling on these films. And I'm going to be real, and I'm going to level with you. You're not going to get what you want. I would like the sequel trilogy to be non-canon too, but unfortunately, they've been made, and there's nothing that any of us can do to change the fact that they happened. You do have two options. One, well, maybe a few, but three options pretty much. You could basically keep dwelling on the past, complaining about the sequels for the rest of your life. Two, move on from the sequel trilogy and just, wait for new Star Wars projects to come out. And also maybe read some Legends if you want, a better storyline with Luke, Han, and Leia. Or three, just walk away from Star Wars forever. Honestly, because at this point, the more you complain about these movies, the more you dwell on these films. You're not really a fan of Star Wars. You're just a fan of hating Star Wars. And I think that's what we're seeing with the sequel trilogy. It's just an evolution of those who hated the prequels, and they didn't let those movies go. So they are now shitting on the sequel trilogy. They only like the prequels, and their like for them is not even legitimate, most of these people, because they're not as bad in their eyes. But at the end of the day, there's little difference between the prequel hate and the sequel hate. Because the sequel hate, a lot of these people hated it for the same reasons they hated, the prequels. And they're pulling the same thing that they pulled on for people who love the prequels, the generation that grew up with them. You're not real Star Wars fans. Doing what they almost pretty much almost succeeded at doing to my generation. Erase an entire generation of Star Wars fans from existence because they don't see them as Star Wars fans. Sorry, I hate to break this to you, but those who love the prequels and the sequels are just as much Star Wars fans as those who like the originals. And you're going to have to live with that. If you're not willing to actually coexist with prequel and sequel fans, then I'm sorry, but I think you need to leave this fandom. And I think a lot of these people need to get a fucking hobby outside of Star Wars. I mean, sequel hate is just, the fandom menace, if you want to summon it up, it's just sequel hate. It's nothing more. And I can't believe I'm even saying something positive about the sequel trilogy. It's just a discussion. Yeah. Yeah. If the entire sequel trilogy was like TFA, they would not be freaking, doing what they do now. They'd be sucking the sequel trilogy's dick so hard it wouldn't be funny. Yeah, I agree. I mean, oh, sorry about that, Attack of the Menace. I wasn't paying attention. Actually, I apologize for not highlighting your comments. You got any questions? I'm sorry for ignoring your comments up until now. Star Trek, yeah. And I might talk about this in the future, but then again, I don't have as much experience in the Star Trek fandom as Star Wars. I mean, most of my experience in the Star Trek fandom has been positive for the most part. I've experienced more positivity in the Star Trek fandom than Star Wars. Then again, I'm fortunate to probably be in positive Star Trek groups that aren't that I did leave a few toxic Star Trek groups, but my experience through Star Trek fandom is not jaded like Star Wars is. So, yeah. Yeah, they would. I mean, okay, I'm going to just talk about each film, like the legacy of each of these films. Force Awakens, the legacy of this film, if I had to be real, Force Awakens is just, it's going to be forever remembered as a movie that was trying hard to recapture the magic of the original trilogy. It succeeded, in the short term to recapture it, because those who didn't like the prequel trilogy and they thought that an original trilogy aesthetic was something that was pleasing to see, with 21st century technology. I'm not going to lie, it was pleasing watching the Force Awakens for the first time because of the aesthetic. Because this is what an original trilogy Star Wars film would look like if they did it in the modern day. But that wore off in multiple viewings. And Force Awakens is one of those films that it's great the first time you watch it and you don't know anything else about Star Wars outside the Force Awakens. But in multiple viewings, it gets worse. You notice the flaws more. Like, if you love Star Wars genuinely and you love Star Wars doing new things, The Force Awakens just was trying to play it safe. The Force Awakens was just doing everything it could not to offend, the original trilogy fanboys. And honestly, if I could sum it up Force Awakens, it was original trilogy fanboys, the movie. it was trying so hard to cater to them that it pretty much went out of its way not to offend them. Like no, barely any references to the prequels. Like it was just paying a homage, which one of the most common defense for the Force Awakens to the original Star Wars movies. I mean, this wouldn't be a problem if it was done if the movie had its own original content. Where the Force Awakens, most of its original content was like bare bones, and not to mention the Force Awakens did, in its defense, at least when it first came out, did it was so mysterious what the hell happened in the past 30 years. Why is everything like this? Who's Rey? Like, why did Kylo Ren fall to the dark side? Like, there was a lot of, interesting things, it's set up that potentially, if you look at it if you were think, okay, let's just think about it from a 2015 perspective. That's why the hype for The Last Jedi was so high. But the legacy of The Force Awakens is it didn't really do anything of its own. All it did was go out of its way not to anger Star Wars fans, and it's outlined for the sequel. It's potentially what could happen. It was so vague that I think no matter who would have directed The Last Jedi, it would have been impossible to follow up on. The Force Awakens will be looked at as a cash grab, that tried to play on nostalgia. That's The Force Awakens' legacy. The Last Jedi's legacy. The Last Jedi, holy shit. This movie is going to be debated back and forth for decades to come. If, what Rian Johnson did to Luke Skywalker, was it justifiable for him to take his character into the path that he did? Luke Skywalker alone is one of the most debated topics in Star Wars. And in my opinion, this is probably the Last Jedi's legacy. Divisiveness. There's no denying that The Last Jedi is one of the most divisive movies that came out, in the past 20 years when it came out. No movie sparked as much anger and controversy as The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi will probably be its legacy that it brought out the worst in the Star Wars fandom, that it brought out like the most toxic elements of the fandom, and it also basically just showed that Star Wars fans will never be satisfied. At least that's I think its legacy will mostly be about. But I do think its main legacy is going to be, debating about decisions that were made regarding how to progress the story, Rey's lineage, Luke's Skywalker's character arc in The Last Jedi. Unlike the other two movies, I think The Last Jedi is probably going to be the one that'll be the most heated when it comes to arguments on forums. And there may be a point where it's possible some websites may ban topics on The Last Jedi altogether because it will always spark debate. It is definitely one of the most divisive, movies of all time. And that's what its legacy is going to be. You're probably going to see a list like 20 years in the future. Most divisive movies, ever made, and The Last Jedi will be pretty high on the list. Divisiveness is The Last Jedi's legacy. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Whatever, time will tell. Rise of Skywalker, its legacy. Oh, God. I think Rise of Skywalker's legacy will be the same as The Force Awakens, but worse. Rise of Skywalker will be a movie that will be looked at as a cash grab, and a movie that was trying to pander to a bunch of internet, trolls, that it didn't actually try to do anything of its own. It'll be looked at as a movie that, went back on what the previous movies established. It'll be looked at as a movie that, doesn't make any sense. It's not grounded, in the reality that it's set up. It broke, its own rules. It's just gonna be looked at as a movie that's stupid and illogical. That even those who liked The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi hated this film. It'll just be looked at as a movie that was trying to play it safe. It didn't do anything new or brought anything new to the table. The Rise of Skywalker's legacy will probably be that abandoning, that it didn't do anything new with the franchise. That it'll be looked at as one of the worst, movies of all time. That's what I think the Rise of Skywalker's legacy. Now, before I get to the next part, I'm just going to highlight some comments. Yeah, oh yeah, let's see. Yeah. Well, let's be honest. Honestly, I don't think you would lose much of the fandom, but to be honest, who I'm just thinking about outside the fandom because most people don't care about fandom. If fandom is an internet thing, they're not going to get rid of something that they put basically almost 10 years into. They're not going to do it. Yes. Good for you, Attack of the Menace. That's true. But if I have to be real, I don't think they want to because their only hobby is hating Star Wars. Hating Star Wars has become a new hobby among Star Wars fans. At least the online fandom. Not most Star Wars fans aren't actually like this. I would like to believe they're not, but I'm so jaded with the Star Wars fandom that forgive me if I generalize the fandom at times when I say that I cannot stand the fandom because of my personal experience. Yeah, I agree. It is so bland. Yeah, Last Jedi is the best of the sequels. And this is coming from someone that hates the movie. Yeah. Yeah, it is the reactionaries that are the loudest when it comes to complaining about it. Everyone else, like the leftist Star Wars fans, like myself, we've basically chilled out on the movie. It's like, okay, it's terrible, but but I've moved on. I mean, most sane people have already moved on, and I just say that this consumerist rebellion with the sequels, it's just a part of a bigger problem with American culture and how capitalism has alienated people from each other, and they see things like Star Wars as part of their personal identity. Yeah, I can't stand Red Letter Media. It's like Red Letter Media had just made it so the prequel trilogy is bad because of Red Letter Media. It's like, wait, you can't make that. You can't actually see that for yourself to see if they're bad. So you need some freaking fat fucking racist clown to tell you how bad these movies are. I mean, come on. Honestly, the prequel trilogy isn't even that bad. Most of his complaints are just nitpicking. Is he really a bad man? Not to defend Rian Johnson, but he got harassed for years by these people, and he still does. Is he a bad man for making a movie that people don't like? No. Honestly, I don't. Rian Johnson, the worst thing that he did was just make a shitty movie. That does not make him a bad person. I'm not even defending him. Kathleen Kennedy has made the money. She's not going anywhere. Honestly. And if she does eventually leave, it's going to be because, she's going to retire. It's not going to have anything to do with this stupid, nonsense of nobody likes Kathleen Kennedy. No one wants to take her job. I mean, come on. Let's be real. Kathleen Kennedy, if she was really that much of a problem, Disney would have gotten rid of her. Disney cares about money. They're not woke. They don't care about this identity politics shit. Disney is all about money. And if reactionary politics would make Disney money, you bet your fucking ass they would do it in a heartbeat. Disney are capitalists. They don't have an ideology other than money. That's their ideology. That's true. It was always there. I don't care if he trolls fans on Twitter. And I've said this, multiple times. I'm jaded with the Star Wars fandom. At least the online portion of the fandom. The you know, I don't care if he trolls online. These people. I mean, they harass other Star Wars fans. They harass people of color and content creators. Because they have an opinion they don't like. It's like they harass actors. They go after you know employees of Lucasfilms. Like, fuck them. I don't feel sympathy for these people. I'm sorry. It's okay. Like I said, the Last Jedi, if I had to be honest, at best is a guilty pleasure. If I, which I don't think so, but if I were to say objectively, that's what it is to me at best. Yeah, Rise TLJ for me, if I had to be honest, it would have been so much better if it didn't have the stupid comedy that they had in the movie. The comedy ruined, TLJ. And there was good concepts in TLJ that could have been explored further in Rise of Skywalker. I might, I'm just going to go on a limb here. Ryan Johnson did not ruin the sequel trilogy. J.J. Abrams did. I mean, God forbid Ryan Johnson does something new and different. God forbid he has a Skywalker that rejects redemption and says, "Fuck the redemption. I want to be my own man." God forbid you make Kylo Ren into an interesting character. But no, I'm J.J. Abrams. I cannot make Kylo Ren into an interesting character because I'm not capable of making Kylo Ren interesting. I have to make Kylo Ren, a fucking crybaby bitch because that's all I can do. He make him a Darth Vader wannabe that nobody can take seriously. Yeah, yeah. I can't enjoy anything JJ is involved in. I think JJ Abrams, is insulting. I feel like JJ Abrams, basically insults fans' intelligence. That's just, what I think JJ Abrams does. Yeah, Jeremy's job is literally to hate on Star Wars. I think Jeremy is a grifter. I don't even think he is a Star Wars fan. I think he's just a grifter. He's just going on the Star Wars hate train because it's a grift because it makes a lot of money. I think he's pretty cool. I hope to see more from him in the future. Actually, he's probably one of the cooler characters that have appeared in the new canon. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. Yeah, Plankett is a sexist tool. honestly, I honestly don't think these geeks and gamers and Jerem. I don't think geeks and gamers, Ryan Kennel or Ryan Kennel, what the fuck you call him, Doomcock. I don't think they believe in any of these rumors. I don't think they believe in this nonsense. They look at their audience, they know their audience is stupid, and they'll believe anything they say. So yeah, I don't think most of these people actually believe most of the stuff that they say. Okay, I'm just letting you know I don't care about Kathleen Kennedy one way or the other. Honestly, I'm just letting you know I don't care. She's just another liberal. That's all she is to me. I don't care about her one way or the other. Yeah, Mike Zero is a meme. If they do this shit in 2040, oh my god, if they're like 70-year-old men, like, Kathleen Kennedy is finally leaving Lucasfilm. I know I wasted my life complaining about Star Wars, But it's for real, folks. Oh God. Yes, it does. Oh God. There's nothing. Oh God. Do I have to get to these can of worms? No. I'm sorry. There's nothing racist about what John Boyega said. I don't believe it in this, this stupid nonsense that people say something against white people that suddenly makes them racist. No, that's stupid. I am indifferent to the new canon at this point. If there's something good about the if there's something good in the new canon, I like it. If there's something I hate in the new canon, I ignore it. Yes. His redemption was like, yeah, what it's like, I mean, come on. Kylo Ren is a Nazi. He's he's not even part of the good Nazi archetype. He's the Nazi archetype done badly, honestly. It's like, oh yeah, he does one good thing, for Ray, and like, oh my god, that makes him a good guy? No. No, 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 no. No, okay, I'm not even gonna get. I'll get to these. I might do another stream one of these days about Kylo Ren as a character because Kylo Ren was like the only character that had any interesting things about him, and well, whatever. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies are just wannabe Star Wars films, especially Star Trek Into Darkness. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't even know if they would turn him into Vader because he's like Kylo Ren's just Vader if he was a teenager in high school. James Bond is literally an imperialist freaking power fantasy. Yeah. No. Racism, is not the same as prejudice. And I feel like the attacks that John Boyega gets from mostly, white Star Wars fans and white, content creators like Jeremy of Geeks and Gamers and the Quartering, inciting harassment campaigns against, people of color that write Star Wars books or hosts a show, that's racism. But according to these reactionaries, it's only racist if they say something against white people. Now, let's see. I cannot keep up with all these, so in a bit I'm going to get to the legacy of the sequel trilogy. Yeah. Honestly, they should have. The problem with Kylo Ren is they should have gone the Zuko route from the last Airbender, but they didn't even do that. Oh God, thank God. Fuck Planket. Hey, what's up? Okay, I'm not going to get into the stuff with home. Okay, I'm not getting off topic unless it's related to Star Wars. I'm not going to talk about this. Sorry. Yeah, that's what he did. Anyway, now the sequel trilogy as a whole, what its legacy is going to be. I personally think the sequel trilogy is going to be looked at as a disjointed mess. That's what's going to be looked at in its legacy. And it's also going to be looked at as it's just a cash grab, honestly, because at the end of the day, there's nothing new or different about Rise of Skywalker or The Force Awakens that you cannot see in other films. No, these movies did not like push the boundaries of film. They didn't actually do what the original trilogy did or the prequels and pushed technology. The sequel trilogy just didn't do anything in the film industry. I mean, compare like the sequels to Marvel. Marvel pushed technology. Like the things that Marvel is currently doing now wouldn't be possible without the prequels. And what the Star Wars shows are doing now are doing it because of the Marvel films. So in my opinion, the sequel trilogy are nothing special, and they're just like any other film that came out in the last decade. And they're just your generic blockbuster. That's all they're going to be looked at as. The Last Jedi on its own but probably does have a legacy to stand on because there is enough to talk about, but there's nothing to discuss with The Force Awakens. The movie is aged like milk. The last, Jedi, you're going to hear people debate this movie for decades to come on filmmaking decisions and story decisions, from, critics and fans. Rise of Skywalker is one of those movies that you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing almost nobody. Like Rise of Skywalker, from my experience of the film, seeing it and hearing people talk about it, people were either indifferent to it at best and like confused at worst on what the hell this movie is supposed to be. So yeah, the sequel trilogy's legacy, it's gonna be a mixed one. That's the best it could hope for. That is true, but that's a discussion for another time regarding Palpatine, actually. Well, I may talk about that in a later video. Anyway, guys, as much as I would like to continue this stream, there's another stream coming up that I would like to watch. I did enjoy doing this, and I'm sorry, for those who showed up late in the stream that showed up towards the end. If you want to watch this stream, well, just go to my community tab. For those of you who, want to watch it from the very beginning. Anyway, have a good day, everyone. May the force be with us all. Stay safe, and see you guys next time with another video. Later.